Now, it's 18 minutes past 8. Should the UK stay out of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia? Well, a former Foreign Secretary thinks so. David Owen, no less.
Yes, he says any peace talks should be conducted between Russia and Ukraine alone, with the US the only country with the authority to act as a potential arbiter.
Well, let's speak to Lord Owen, who joins us now. What a pleasure to have you on GB News, Lord Owen. Thank you for your time this morning. Why do you think, in terms of this war, the UK, I beg your pardon, should stay out of any negotiations?
Well, it's not just the UK. Basically, the negotiations have to take place between Putin and the Ukrainian president. And we should do everything in our power to keep it on that basis. We are not participants in this war. We are helping Ukraine because we are a defensive organization. And NATO has kept its discipline very well. There was a bad period when we were having President Macron endlessly going and talking to Putin, and to some extent, much lesser extent, the German Chancellor. It's much better to focus the attention now of Beijing and President Xi on the need to bring Putin around the table with the president of Ukraine, and hopefully that will be done. The Spaniards are going to visit Xi, the Spanish Prime Minister. That's fine. Spain is a serious country. They'll follow the guidelines of NATO, and the guidelines of NATO, I'm sure, are no private enterprise, no one country going out on a limb, and focus on the fundamental issue, that is President Putin meeting the president of Ukraine.
Lord Owen, we are going to have to see a mediator in this when it comes to peace talks, though, aren't we? It's very unlikely that we'll see Putin and Zelensky round a table and actually coming to a resolution that makes both sides happy. You touched upon there President Xi and meeting President Putin this week. What do you make of that and China kind of positioning itself as a middleman? Is that something that we should trust, that they are there to negotiate peace?
There was an old slogan that Reagan used to use, trust and verify. And in negotiations like this, you've got to be very careful. Everybody's trying to seize an advantage. In my view, the war is going to start to, the tempo is going to increase now. The weather's improving, and I think that Ukraine are planning a really major offensive. They've been in a defensive role up until now. They've held that very well through the winter period, but I think we'll see there's much more movement, and we'll also see how much new weaponry they've had from NATO countries, and I think you'll see there's considerable improvement.
That you brought up trust and verify. It is such an important phrase and very apt for this. But even with that in mind, do you have any concern that even when China first came in with its peace plan, which may be flawed, but nevertheless the United States immediately came out and dismissed it? I mean, that struck me as being slightly odd when President Zelensky himself was saying that he was interested in what the Chinese were saying.
Yes, I think, again, the great person to be out there is President Zelensky. And he has links with China. Ukraine has been supplying with China with grain over many, many years in substantial percentage. This is not a minor feature in the import of food into China. Now, let's see what happens. I think, genuinely, let's see. And I'm not sure whether it will come to anything. Let's hope it will. And I think that there is no doubt that Russia and China are allied now. I personally think that's a sadness, and I think it was better to try and keep China separate from Russia, but that's their decision. And they are going to form more and more an alliance, which they'll try to extend to other countries around the United Nations and build up the numbers of countries that they can speak for. So it's not going to be automatic that in the past the United States and Britain and France on the Security Council could guarantee really a majority of the General Assembly. The General Assembly will start to move slightly in favour of Russia and China, and they're exploiting that. But the most essential thing to do is to call Xi's bluff, if you like. He says he's got a peace settlement. Well, let's see what it's about. There's going to be no peace until there's a meeting with President Putin. And I think if he says to President Putin, now is the time to meet with Zelensky, it'd be very hard for President Putin, who's in a weak position, to not accept Xi's advice.
David Owen, it's a real pleasure to talk to someone with your experience. Thank you very much indeed.